Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Audit Committee. I'm Councillor Geeta Sudra and Chair of this committee. And we're going to introduce ourselves. I'll start with the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Geeta. Good morning, everybody. Vice Chair.
Thank you. Hi there, I'm Zoe Fairley. I'm Ward Councillor for Ardley and Little Bromley.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Mark Platt. I'm the tendering member for the Homelands Ward. Can I just ask, Chairman, would you prefer to be referred to as Chairman, as Chair, or what, is there so that I don't make a mistake? You don't mind? Oh, well, okay, thank you.
Hi, Graham Steady, Ward Member for Bridlingsea.
Lovely. And I think we'll welcome the officers as well. So start with you, Keith.
I am Keith Dern and I am the Community Service Officer and clerking this meeting.
I'm Richard Barrett. I'm Assistant Director for Finance and IT and Section 151 Officer.
I'm Craig Clawson. I'm the Internal Audit Manager.
Good morning, Karen Townsend, Executive Projects Manager, Governance.
Good morning, Claire Lewis, Assurance and Resilience Manager.
Lovely, thank you. Next,
Chairman, can I just refer to who we might have joining us virtually?
Yes. So we've got, I believe, the external auditors this morning. Yeah, please do.
Morning, I'm Steve Bladen from Director with BDO. I'm actually standing in for Aphrodite Lefebvre this morning.
Good morning, I'm Tiamaka Dreyer. I'm an Audit Manager with BDO.
Be welcome. Next, apologies for absence and substitutes. Minutes of the last meeting. I believe, Zoe, you were at the last meeting?
Yes, Chairman, I was at the last meeting and I can account for them as being a true and correct record.
Any declaration of...
Sorry, Chairman. Are we having matters arising from the minutes of the previous meeting?
No, I don't believe we do.
It comes up in the report later on, does it? I just got a couple of questions that I've got from the minutes of the previous meeting, if I may.
A decision was made. We don't address matters for minutes in the last meeting. If it is in relation to any of the specific reports that you find in the meeting today, I believe the officers could possibly address them at that point, but not under the item minutes for the last meeting.
Sorry, Keith. Okay, so just for clarity then, so there's no matters from the minutes. There's no matters arising from the previous minutes, as in on the schedule. But what you were saying is if it comes up later on, did I understand that correctly? Apologies.
That's exactly it, Councillor, yes.
So what if it doesn't come up later on?
I wouldn't be... I'm not sure if I could answer that question right now. I would have to go back to my manager at the Democratic Services, but I can answer that. Minutes for the last meeting has been addressed before and it is not a part of the item 2 minutes of the meeting, so we don't readdress previous minutes.
Thank you very much. They were very simple questions. Is it possible to ask your Democratic manager during this meeting so we can resolve it today?
I think maybe it would be at the discretion of the chairman if they took the questions.
Yeah, if we leave this to the end of the meeting, maybe we can bring it back up Is that?
Are you happy, Councillor Platt, to just?
Yeah, I'm happy to do
arrange the
so.
matters
Yeah, that's fine.
At the end, if they aren't covered in the items, I'd be very happy for you to do that.
Yeah, I mean, as a new member to the committee, obviously I've got lots of questions and I've just got to, but if we could pick them up at the end, that would be superb. Thank you very much, and thank you for your indulgence.
So next, declarations of interest.
Chair, apologies for interrupting. Could we just make a comment on the minutes? The minutes note that it was Darshia Vospa that was the person who attended from BDO to present an update. It was actually Aphrodite Lefebvre that did the meeting, so I don't know whether that can actually be corrected.
Do you know on that? It's all good. Yep. I think he's got it in hand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, questions on notice pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 38. Keith.
We have received no questions at this time, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, item number 5 then, report of the internal audit manager. A1, report on internal audit, pages 5 to 26.
Thank you, Chairman. So if I take you through my reports, I've got 3 reports in one, really. So you've got my periodic report, which is an update on the progress of the internal audit plan for 2022-23. Update on progress for 2023-24, and then my annual report, the head of internal audit report. So what I'll do is I'll take you through the periodic reports first of all the work that we've done over the last quarter since the last committee, and take questions on that first, if that's okay, and then I'll move on to the annual report. So if you go to page 10, this sets out the progress that we've completed so far. So 2022-23 audit plan, we've completed all of the work that we needed to complete, and within that plan we've had 2 audit reports that received an improvement required. So if I give you an explanation for the new members, is that improvement required means that we've got major issues that have been highlighted within the report. So we highlight them here for you to discuss and go through. And those 2 reports in the year were housing repairs and maintenance and housing allocations, where those issues were raised. I'll go on a bit further later where we give you a bit more detail of what they were. But in terms of the work that we've done for that plan, we've completed the plan, and within each audit we look at the impact of COVID-19, which we've discussed previously. It's still ongoing, still issues and changes that teams have had to make. But what we do is we look at that. We look at whether or not those changes were still relevant. Are there any issues? Should we revert back to how we were before? And there's been no issues from us throughout this last year, so 2022-23. Nothing significant that the services haven't dealt with. They actually adapted really well to the impact of COVID, and I think we're actually better off as an organisation in terms of how we changed and the new processes that we use within our department. So there's nothing major there, nothing significant within that part to report today. We always talk about resources.
Sorry, Chairman, sorry.
Yep, that's fine.
Sorry, Craig, I don't want to interrupt you, but just wanted to clarify with you as you're giving these reports. Are we asking questions as we go along? Would you?
You can do. I mean, we don't really have a usually I'll say when I'm finished that part of the report, I'll ask if there's any questions. But if you've got any as we go along, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Chairman.
So the next part of the report is resourcing. So we give you an update on the resourcing of the internal audit team. We were out to recruit an apprentice. We nearly had a new apprentice this month, and at the very last minute, they decided they found something else. We're really struggling to recruit in our team. It's quite a niche area, but as we do, we'll go out again, see what we can see if there's anything available. Could be just time of year. We don't know, but we'll try again and update you again at the next committee. So that's just a resourcing update. So if I move on to page 11, which is where the actual issues that we'd identified, the significant issues. So housing allocations was one of them. So there have been improvements to since the last time we audited this area. There has been improvements to the service. So they've got a new system called Jigsaw, which is meant to automate a lot of the work they do, to free up staff time to do what they need to do. But there is still one element of that system that's we have issues with, which is about when you allocate a house or to someone, there's a criteria that you must meet in order to get on the list and get to the top of the list. And the system is meant to use that criteria and work out who should be offered next, because it's quite standard. It looks at the facts of it, and then it should decide who's next on the list. The issue we have is there is still a manual process where staff could make changes to that. And sometimes that's required. That is required to do that, depending on the circumstances. But you cannot see why they've made that change. The audit trail of it is difficult to find. So therefore, there's still a risk that someone could be overlooked who possibly should have been at the top of the list, but it got given to someone else. So there is that risk there. We didn't find that.
Sorry, can I come in there? So you said there's a risk. Okay, how are you now mitigating that risk?
So what we've asked them to do is at the moment, until the system can be changed, we've asked them to run a report of the previous list every time. So, which is really clunky, really convoluted, but at least it gives you that trail of this was the list at the point in which we made that offer. So,
thank you, Chairman. So when do you see that coming to a close, where they'll be able to stop printing off the list and be able to move forward with confidence? Because that's
so they have given us a date. I don't have it with me at the moment, but we have been given a date and where the system, the changes that they need to be made will be happening. And
when is that date?
I don't have it with me at the moment, but we have agreed a date with them.
So is it relatively soon?
It should be soon, yeah. Anything where we have any significant issues, what we class as significant, there's not normally
would that be fair to say it's in the next 3 months?
Yes, so we would hope so. Yes.
Right. Thank you. That's great. That's an assurance. Thank you.
So that was the issue with housing allocation. So we're raising it here today, so you're aware because of the significance of it. The next part of the report is housing repairs and maintenance. We're just re-raising this again. So this has been a long-term issue within this committee. So the department went through a big change, lots of processes changing, brought in a new system that we've talked about in the past, and we've had Damien and Andy White come along in the past to give you an update on progress. This is something where, yes, we classed them as significant, but we knew it was a long-term plan to make those changes. So we're re-raising it again, just so you're aware that those are still ongoing, and that Damien will be back in September to give you an update.
So, Chairman, if I may. So the same scenario applies then. You have a risk, you've identified the risk. Systems are in place to mitigate that risk.
Yep.
We don't have a timeline yet as to when we believe that will be resolved. But
We have
Damien's coming here in September.
Yeah, so we do have a timeline for, because there was quite a few different issues, so it wasn't just one.
Give us an estimate of your timeline.
So in terms of, some of them have already been completed. So for instance, I'm trying to think of it off the top of my head because there were probably 10 or 12 last year.
Could we then have a chairman?
I'm just going to say this is a rolling thing, right?
Yes.
So some things come on, and as you complete, they move on.
Yeah. So
it could change in the next.
Our timelines have to adapt as dependent on, because they're waiting on a system to be implemented, which again, they're reliant on them to give them the date. So we're continually just asking them, when are you going to be able to do this? So as and when they're signed off, we sign them off.
Chairman, I wouldn't want us as Tendring District Council to be in the same position as our external auditors, as much as we have, it will be forthcoming, and it never comes. So could we please have a report to this committee then as to what's actually involved and the projected timelines, so that then we'll be able to actually audit as to whether we're able to meet those timelines and have a proper assurance of things going forward.
Yeah, we can bring back we've got a previous report that we brought here, which had all that detail, so we can bring that back and we can give you an update on as to which ones were. We haven't previously done that in the past because there's quite a lot of detail, but we can do that.
Okay, I don't know. I think they're in transition at the moment. There's manual and there's software coming in. Is that right, Richard?
Yeah, and I think what Craig said there, I think we're really quite useful, is actually say below this, there's you drill down another layer, then you drill down another layer. The layer down has those action points, doesn't it? 10, 11 action points, and each one completed, not completed, completed. So actually, that'd be really useful for you to see, because actually you're getting a summary of your overall position rather than more slightly, not the real detailed stuff, but that level down about the top 10 actions and where we are with those 10 actions, which we can bring back. Damien's coming back in September. We can perhaps share that before that via email, if that's okay. That's okay with you, Craig.
So yeah, I was just going to ask, we're expecting further reports in September, so I'm assuming that you would be giving us an update in September as part of your programme report, really. I'm just checking that, Craig, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I also have many notes here around timelines, etc., with things, and I do think for both of these matters, the housing allocation and the housing repairs, it is really important that we do note those dates so that we are able to properly audit and hold to account and push back when we need to just keep attention on there. While we're talking about the housing allocation, my only other question would be, is there a mechanism within the software that would be able to decide on an equal claim?
I mean, I think that's where there is some manual where management need to look and they make those decisions. I don't know if that's ever happened where it's an equal claim, because there's so many different factors, but yeah, but that's the point, I suppose, what we're trying to make is that when those decisions are made that are outside of the system capabilities, that we should be recording that so we can see exactly why those decisions were made. So that's sort of part of the overall issue. But in terms of timelines, and we can make that part of a normal process, if you like, where we're raising these significant issues, we can bring you those agreed dates as well in future. I'm quite happy to do that.
That's quite an interesting subject, because I had that in mind already. So deadlines, maybe, yeah, would be a good thing. Yeah.
I think proposed timelines and progress against those timelines. I think I'm imagining that this has been the situation for quite some time, and it's positive to hear that the officers are now addressing that. And I'm aware that problems can sometimes occur with providers, suppliers who are working with IT. They're notoriously troublesome. So I think for me, the assurance that officers are working on this and have it in hand is great, but I support the need to track this and track the progress. But yeah, thank you.
Chairman, thank you. I endorse what my colleague has said there. It's vitally important in this day and age that we do. The responsibility on this committee is so significant. I don't know whether I would encourage everybody to read the BVI report thoroughly. Be interested to know whether anybody's actually read it. And it shows the lack of investigation by a committee such as ours, and how things went wrong, and they went wrong very quickly, but over an extended period of time. So it is vital that we drill down to a certain level, not to granular level, I'll give you that, but a certain level. And we do have an understanding, because the accountability, as is written in the papers, is with us. Therefore, we should, be challenging at every point. So thank you, Ian, for your comments on. And that relates back to my query earlier about minutes of the previous meeting, because it mentions in there the software OneServe and the current system Northgate. And I don't know whether they relate to the software that you were referring to earlier. They do. So that, in a way, would have answered that question for me, but we'll pick that up later. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So the next issue that we're raising is to do with recycling and waste. So the finding that I've included in the report, it doesn't impact in terms of the overall recycling and waste audit. We're looking at a massive contract, and this is quite this is a small element of that. So we haven't given the overall recycling and waste audit improvement required, because this is purely related to the green waste element of it. But the issue itself, if we did an audit just on green waste, then we'd be bringing back an improvement required audit for you. So the issue itself is around reconciliations between the number of people that have paid for their green waste bins and then the actual income that we're getting in. And we could not work that out. That they do not know whether or not they were getting everything in. I think work has been done since to look at that, but at the moment, that's the issue that we're raising, and we've asked for those changes to be made.
And I would say it's are you going digital on this as well? Like, so there's accuracy.
So there is a digital program in place. It was a system that was meant to be brought in a few years ago, I think, but it was. I don't think it's ever been fully implemented properly, and we kind of got two systems running together, which has now confused everything. So we're now trying to get our IT departments, our department itself, to resolve it.
Yeah, I would say it's probably a high priority thing for us. Yeah, we don't want loss, basically, as minimal as it may be. We need to cut that down. Zoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, in terms of that implementation, how long will the agreed actions take to implement? Will there be mechanisms to deal with the discrepancies which best limit the risk to reputational damage? And I'm talking, I suppose, about how customers perceive us to be.
Sorry. Yep. So once again, we've made sure that we've got those workarounds in. So we've asked for that work to be done to find out exactly who should get what, how much money we should have. I think that's ongoing at the moment. But then again, we've got two actions really. Sort out for now with a workaround process to make sure you know what's happening, and then sort out the system that you brought in to try and resolve this and save resource to make sure it works for you. We have dates. Well, we have the dates for those. Again, I haven't brought them with me, but it's part of our normal follow-up process. We follow that up and chase them up as part of the normal audit process. So.
Thank you, Chairman. Craig, how many people in your department? 3 of you. Okay. Yeah. So we can see part of the problem, can't we? In some respects, I'm pleased my colleague isn't in the room because he would be shouting and screaming about this. So it falls upon me to do so. This is quite a failure. Is this an internal failure just of TDC or of Veolia involved in this as the contractor?
This is, it's difficult to say because Veolia have their own processes and we have ours, and trying to get them to work with us I'm assuming is not always easy. But there are, yes, in terms of our systems, they've failed in this instance, and we need to resolve them as soon as we can.
Thank you. I get that. Of course, you need to resolve them, but I don't know whether the failure is on the TDC side, on the Veolia side, or a combine of the two. It says here, there is no master list to confirm total number of garden waste customers. What kind of list is there? Could I ask, Madam Chairman, that we invite the cabinet member responsible for waste and recycling? Apologies if I've got his title or her title wrong. I'm not familiar with who is who in the cabinet, and perhaps the relevant officers to come to explain to this committee, because it's a little bit unfair on our colleague Craig here that we're trying to tease all this information out of him. It would be good, Craig, if you could bring dates of things when you think things are going to happen, because we can tally that up with what the service then say, which will be something that we will be able to do. But I would like to see, as soon as possible, considering that there are people apparently out there that are getting garden waste collected for free, and that's not fair on everybody else. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. You took the words out my mouth, because that is something I was going to suggest. So yeah, we can definitely have that on the next meeting. Yeah.
Is that this is one of the biggest concerns for me. I'm putting my Section 141 hat on because this is one of the biggest concerns for me. What's happened here, and to give the assurance, it ties in what you're saying, but you obviously give weight behind that as well, which is appreciated. But it's I've spoken to the assistant director personally on this one. What I didn't want to happen is we strive to have this perfect solution, which takes 6 months, and we still haven't mitigated the risk in the short term. So it's actually, we might need to be crude quickly to reduce this risk down while we're still working on some digital solution. So he's given me the assurance that he's working on that. I'll ask him for another update. You're obviously requesting him to come along as well as the portfolio holder to the next meeting in September, and perhaps we'll provide updates in the interim period, because this is a significant issue that we need to resolve quickly, even if it's crude manual process, and we shift the risk from TDC to the contractor. If we can do that, question mark, but we're having that conversation now. So yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, Chairman. It'd be helpful if we were sitting in the room where you could see us without having to turn, but there we are. Could we then have an interim? Could we have something? September for me is a long time away when we're talking about taxpayers' money. But could we have something that gives us an explanation as to what you've just alluded to, Richard, is there is something going on, crude as it may be, because then we have a level of assurance ourselves that actually we can see that something is happening, rather than us waiting until September to hear something which we may have been able to do something about in the interim. Thank you.
Yeah, I support you, Councillor Platt, on that one. I think an interim I'm not so concerned about in terms of September is going to come very soon. But what I would like to see is some kind of detailed summary of the size of the problem and some background as to how it's come about and the implications. So the things like the number of people who we got records of everybody who is receiving free collections and have a TDC bin? Are we able to backtrack effectively write to these people, demand payment if they've not paid, and threaten to withdraw bins. But also, if we can have a report that's worked up with some more detail and background to the issue, I'm happy for September, but I'm open to other members' views on that one. I'd very much encourage that. Thank you, Chair.
Chairman, thank you. I understand, Ian, and I agree with you on part, in as much as what we are also trying to strive to achieve here is, I picked this up actually on my way in today about recycling, and these people are contributing towards our recycling figures in some way. And so the fact that they are not paying for it at the moment might not be their fault. It might be the authority's fault for not having systems in place that it should have. And so perhaps what we should do is have an amnesty or something like that, or a moment going forward from this date. You will be, but you know, we don't want to get into the graphs and the details as to why something. People might have moved house and left an old bin there, and then the new occupants just come along and it's business as usual for them. It always goes out, whatever. So someone else might have paid for it. So let's not be too draconian with our measures. Let's have a scenario where we're trying to encourage people to not drive to the recycling centre for their garden waste, but use our service. I'm sure there perhaps could be a financial benefit to this council if everything's up and running as it should be. I think there was a massive uptick of this service during COVID, during lockdown. So let's explore all the opportunities, not necessarily have a big stick. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. No, just to say, I mean, a lot of what Mark's saying there relates to the actual service provision as opposed to the processes that go in behind that provision. What we want to know as an audit committee is that it's being dealt with. I certainly would appreciate an update prior to September that something is in place that is being dealt with, and then further reassurance in September. That would suit me. Thank you, Chair.
That's something that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely fine. I mean, I've asked for the assurance back to me, so actually I'll share. So all the things you've asked, I need to understand, and then we'll share it with you way before September. So I'll chase it up. That's absolutely fine. And if I say so, well, it's just an example. There, Councillor Platt, is that if that example you use there, how do you prove that person's been putting a bin out? They might have it in their back garden, never put it out. So you said it's very, very difficult from a position of recovery, which has the connotations of how much is exposed to non-recovery where the service has been given, which we need to look at as well. So yes, absolutely fine. I'll get the assurances and then we'll pass that on to you, and hopefully we've answer all your questions you've raised there. If we haven't, we can go back. But yeah, we can do that as soon as possible.
Thanks, Richard. Back to Craig.
So the last part of that report is about giving you an update on previous issues that were raised at the committee. We talked about the depot operations and housing repairs and maintenance and the systems and everything else. One element of that was about stock taking and making sure that they undertake those regular stock takes within the depot. The update that we've had, there's been significant changes. They are now doing that. It's on a regular basis, but it's still quite an old-fashioned way of using spreadsheets, and which is not ideal. I think the issue was that we were originally told by, I suppose, the OneServe system that you talked about earlier that they could do that, and now it's turned out that apparently they can't. So now we've got to find a standalone system that will do that for us, and I think that's the next step that we've asked them to move on to. Again, we have agreed a date, but we'll bring them back so you're aware of when they actually implement.
Zoe.
Thank you, Craig. You're saying in here that this is something that we're looking to create internally, this system, and you're not sure of a date at this point in time as and when that could be done or implemented?
Yeah, so the latest update I had from the service as part of our follow-up process was that they were going to try and see whether or not our IT department could actually build the sort of scanning system that you scan things in, scan it out, which will save their staff a lot of time. But in terms of how long it'll take, we haven't had the actual information back from IT yet. So once we do, we'll then have something to chase up. But the service themselves have to decide whether or not they want to have our IT department do it or just buy one off the shelf and have it there.
If I can come back on that, you're talking again about this OneServe system, and I just wonder whether, I don't know, issues such as this perhaps raise some concerns around our procurement process for the original system that perhaps needs to be reviewed or checked, or can you offer any assurance on that, please?
It's whether or not the stock control was in the original spec of when they went out to procure, because we don't hold a lot of stock. Like in terms of what we do, if we need big things, we'll go out and buy them and have them delivered to the site that we're working on. So there's the department themselves have to decide what's the best process for them. Should they keep more stock, or should they just have it delivered directly to where they're working from the likes of, I don't know, Screwfix, Travis Perkins, those big companies. So we do, but we will always have a small amount of stock. So it's whether or not it was originally in that spec or not. I don't know, but if it was, then there's an issue there that we procured something that we probably shouldn't have. But in terms of the grand scheme of what OneServe does or is meant to do, stock control is, again, it's a very small element of that, because the system itself is mainly around workforce and in terms of tracking what they're doing, the jobs they're working on, and making their life a lot easier and making it electronic so management can get that information straight away rather than having to go back and check what's happening here, what's happening there. So yeah, it just always goes back to what was in that original spec. And I don't have that answer for you at the moment. We did it was a long time ago that they procured that system. So,
Chair, can I just reiterate a request that any system of tracking stock we also get officers to look at linking it to the purchase, so that we've got cradle to grave kind of tracking, so that we know we're aware of what we've purchased and we can follow it through stock and out again, so we have a clear idea of how that system is robust, really. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And any stock take system, we would expect to have some kind of link to our procurement system.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Craig. Apologies, I'm going back up the page, so forgive me. I've got a graph here that mentions where it's management response to internal audit findings. And it mentions there about those that are overdue for less than 3 months, etc., not yet due. It doesn't give me out of how many. So it's hard for me to gauge. We've got one. How many systems are you looking at? 10, 100, 1,000?
Historically, we used to provide all of that information. It's quite a lot there in our reports, and we was asked to condense it down to what we see as being the high priorities. So at the moment, there's literally one significant issue.
One significant
that's
issue.
overdue
over 3 months. Yeah.
So
less than 3 months. Sorry, but out of how many? Some context is what I'm after.
Context in terms of the total findings. So I think overall we probably have over 100 anyway. In terms of
100 plus.
Yeah, so but in terms of significant ones, we're probably looking at 10 for the year,
Right.
if that. So so
Yeah.
we report. So at this committee, we usually only report what those major findings. So
So could we then going forward? Because I'm trying to work with you here, yeah, and make it, so could we then identify them as a percentage so that we can? I mean, that might be 0.05%, but I get caught on that for an hour thinking about it, etc., etc. Or it could be 10%, and it'd be worthwhile me being caught for an hour thinking about it. So, great, thank you. Yeah, that's right.
Numerator and the denominator as well. That will be informative for all members, I think.
it's okay.
No, I think this is going to be a very interesting committee. So far has been. Any more questions for Craig? Not in that bit. Oh.
I'll come back.
Interesting discussion, I think, as well. I mean, you might kick me under the table, Craig. I think the discussion we've had today is really those high severity issues that we've got in there. You're getting a very high level summary. You'll then rely upon asking someone to come back and give an update. With Audit Committee, it's that quarterly, isn't it? It's that quarterly. So I'm just wondering if we can find a way, as you said, with that discussion we had, can we just drill down that little bit? If there's five actions, we might have done 4. And then 3's out, fifth one's outstanding or whatever. So I think if we can just see if we can find a way to perhaps if an appendix or so, nothing too heavy. You don't want sort of 52 pages to add to your agenda, but find a way we can just hopefully just give you a little bit more information behind those high severity issues. So we'll explore that and see what we can do for the next meeting. If that's okay with you.
Yeah, I mean we keep that information anyway. So it's just about how I condense it enough for you to see it on the page and be understandable in front of you, because it's usually big spreadsheets of what's the progress, what's happening, when's the date meant to be. So I can try and condense that down so you can see that information. So the next part. So if I go on to this year's plan, so the 23-24. Oh yeah.
Chairman, if I may, just prior to that, just a couple of points, general points. On page 10, 22-23 internal audit plan have been completed, all expected audits. So four audits were outstanding as per the 30th of the 3rd minutes. I'm presuming then that those 4 audits have been completed and are part of the 8 audits that were completed April to May, and that those audits, 8 audits completed April to May, all related to 22-23? Okay, so is there any lag now, or are you where you expect to be? Thank you. My next one is at the bottom of the same page. It's disappointing to hear that the department remains undersourced. Hopefully 3rd time lucky. If this does continue, what is the impact on our internal audit process work, the work level, morale, how long or how do you think you're going to be able to cope with that? How long can that be maintained?
And dealing with us.
So that's my next one. I've got a couple more, Chairman. Please bear with me.
So we've struggled with recruitment for some time. At the moment, so the follow-up process I talked about earlier, where we're chasing members of staff, what's happening here, that's something that we would give to an apprentice or admin to do that process for us and keep chasing, and then that information gets passed to me. But at the moment, our auditor does that. And yeah, so Bonnie Smith, who's one of our auditors, she chases up in my name, it goes out in my name, it follows up, but she does the process of chasing and follow, and also some of the admin work for some of the audits. If we can free that up, then the auditors themselves can spend more time working on the more specialist bits of them that they need to work on, and we can get the admin to help out with the sort of standard work. We've been able to function without it so far. We are stretched, but it's long term. I'm hoping we can get someone in, but at the moment we're able to cope with that impact.
So as a last point, if I could just come back on that, and you know, it's really positive actually to hear about the overall direction of travel, and yeah, I just think we need very much to understand how the resource is going to impact, because a situation like that can't continue to go on without it having a detrimental effect on the team.
Go on to the 2023-24, but I think that, so on page 17, we've got the internal audit progress for 23-24, and it's just giving you an update of the audits that we've got in place at the moment and that we're working on. There's no sort of further update in terms of, we haven't finalised any of those reports yet, so there's nothing to report back.
Sorry, Chairman. Craig, please help us out. When you put on here a total of 6 audits are in fieldwork phase.
Yep.
Could you please just list for us?
Yeah, they are. So if you, in the middle of that,
in the middle of the block, it says it there.
You've got corporate governance, planning development, leisure.
So they're the 6.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I missed that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Greg.
Confused from brilliancy. So, for instance, the Veolia situation. I think what we have to find, what we have to ascertain is, what is it a failure of? Is it a failure of leadership or management? So, is it a failure of our contact between TDC and Veolia? And I've often thought this before, but how early or how soon do portfolio holders get involved? How soon or how quick in any process do portfolio holders get involved? Would this have been highlighted to portfolio holders, or are portfolio holders holding it at arm's length? Because I think we might have an opportunity now, because I know we've talked about resources for the department, and maybe you've got an opportunity now to actually put your recommendations forward on how you can actually increase the department, and then put that forward, because we've got the new corporate plan coming up, we've got the new budgets coming up. So you might have an opportunity. I'm not saying that the administration will go with everything, but you've got an opportunity now. So it's a positive rather than negative. Okay, we can say, you know, but let's hit on the positives, you know. And is there an opportunity for us to be a bit more radical and say, well, hang on, when are portfolio holders involved, and when does the information get to the portfolio holders? Or and if the portfolio holders had the information and not acted on it? So I think maybe we need to come at it from a slightly different angle.
Does anyone have an answer to the
Thank you, Chairman. So I believe I'm the only member in the room that has been a portfolio holder at this council. Apologies. There are 2 of us. And from my perspective, I imagine my colleague would feel the same, it's down to the portfolio holder how involved and connected and immersed they wish to be. If they want to be here every day of the week and know everything about the service, that is open to them. I don't think it's an officer scenario. I mean, officers can provide, but they can only provide what they're asked for.
You know, that's exactly what I'm saying. So when do the portfolio holder get involved in the management process? Well, that's exactly right. So then we need to say there needs to be stronger management, because obviously this has been something that's gone wrong somewhere, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because this stuff is only coming up now. So obviously there has been a problem in sort of line management.
Yeah, I think it's all to do with contracts, right? So the last contract, the new contract. So that is something that will evolve, I think, now.
Chair, can I come in? I think I take the points that have been made by previous portfolio holders, that really it's the discretion and the choice of the portfolio holder in terms of how involved they want to become. But in terms of council process, I think what we're hearing here is that a risk is being flagged up through this process, through the Audit Committee, and I'm assuming that just it will be a natural process that the portfolio holder will be looking. Also, you might know better than me, but when risk registers are reported from audit, in the past I've experienced that other members who have responsibility are cited of those risks that relate to their portfolios, but perhaps officers can put me right there. Or perhaps Councillor Platt can.
Chairman, I refer everyone to page 14. The council is accountable collectively for maintaining a sound system of internal control and is responsible for putting in place arrangements for gaining assurance about the effectiveness of that overall system. So although the portfolio holder might have a responsibility, it's the responsibility of the council. And I see that as a wide umbrella.
I think it's a collection of people, isn't it? But go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, it just from my perspective, you know, it's the, I think there's flags. Our internal control system will throw out flags, so we know about those things there. My personal view is that it's what I also choose to share with my portfolio holder. If I've got an issue that's arising, where do I raise that with the portfolio holder or not? I might say I'm not going to raise that and I'll wait because I'm resolving it, or if it's a significant issue, I'll raise that with the portfolio holder. I can't answer your question, perhaps, Councillor Steady, about was the portfolio holder aware of it? I don't know, and we can obviously feed that back to you, but I'm just explaining for on the ground how I operate would be I'd raise a significant issue with my portfolio holder, and then I'd provide an answer response as well as that. So then I've got that accountability where someone's obviously challenging me as well around that. But also senior management as well would be involved in that as well. So it's that kind of where do you raise it? And I think responsibility would be, speak as I find, is my responsibility to where I raise that at senior management level. I can raise it at senior management level. I can raise it at political level as well as the internal processes that throw those flags up as well. So I think it's a real mixed bag on the ground. I know it's one answer. It's a real mix of how those things kind of get discussed and picked up and dealt with at the end of the day, because we do want to respond to those things, don't we? So yeah.
Chair, can I just come in here? I think I've previously worked for local authorities as an officer and managed many of these contracts, including the waste contracts. And my experience is that these things are not part of the garden waste collection, although very important, is sometimes an afterthought on a contract and can be a variation. I don't know what happened here, but from my experience, I would not consider this to be a major risk. I think the fact that it's getting flagged up is good and positive, but I have to say that I'm aware of, as processes and systems evolve and contractors change and officers change, sometimes the pressure for priorities does leave things like garden waste, which would be probably one of the lesser concerns of an operational
Question?
If I now move on to the annual audit report of the internal audit manager, I'll try and go through it as quickly as I can. There's a lot of information in there about why we do what we do. Councillor Platt has already mentioned about the council as a whole being responsible for internal control. And again, I've highlighted here, that's why we have essentially what we call the 3 lines of defence, which is your senior management and departmental leadership, and then your internal governance controls like quality control, IT security, those sorts of things. And then internal audit is the last one on there. So we're just describing all of how we work as a council really when it comes to control and risk. The approach that we've taken, and I've spoken about this many times, about we try not to follow the old-fashioned approach of telling someone off or doing something that they shouldn't have done after the fact. If there's anything new coming in place, new projects, new systems, whatever, we try to give advice as early as we can. And that's where we're trying to be flexible and make sure that they've been given as much advice from us as we can before we start. Whether or not they use that's entirely up to them, but we try to be as involved as possible. And I suppose that's how we like to work. That's how we add value. I think it's just explaining what we've tried to do throughout the year. We talk about COVID again and the issues that had and what it brought up and the things that we've been doing. And then the last part, I suppose the main part that you want to know about is what was our overall opinion. And our overall opinion, we've given adequate assurance because we've had some significant issues throughout the year. Not every audit has been perfect. Not every department has been as perfect. But in terms of improvement on last year, or from an internal control perspective, it has improved. Like the direction of travel in some departments has got better. Some of the processes have changed. They have improved their controls. So overall, we haven't given substantial because there has been some teething issues, but it's a satisfactory level of assurance from us for this year, for the 2022-23 year. I suppose that's the gist of my report, really. I don't want to go into too much detail, but if there's any questions, happy to take.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Craig. Any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple on the way through. Richard, this one's for you. The first one on Craig's list is about procurement. Is to review the council's compliance with procurement rules for works and services or value which require a tender exercise. So I've asked you a question this week in regard to Jaywick Sands. Is that where that would come in terms of the processes that you were talking about?
There's always overlap because there's procurement and then there's the financial side as well, isn't there? So I think they always go hand in hand. But yeah, fundamentally, that's where it sit. Procurement would be that fundamental position where it derives from. Then the budget increasing, subject to what happens with the in terms of those inflationary increases and whatever. So I think they go hand in hand. So I do want to sort of pigeonhole it, but procurement and the financial sort of governance around decision making sort of go together. So.
Okay. So yeah, and also then on here is Jaywick Sands as a separate project. And yeah, Chairman, I have some concerns on rising costs around and the mechanism around those rising costs. I actually asked a question, and then on Tuesday night when we had full council, another councillor, Councillor Griffiths, also mentioned and has shared his information with me as well that you've gone back on. But so that does bring forward a couple of questions. Is now the appropriate time, Richard, for me to bring those up? Are you happy with that? Yeah. So yeah, I guess the questions are in terms of our financial management and the original decisions that are made around spend. Is the 10% contingency element sufficient, taking into account current market situations, is one question. You also then mentioned, Richard, that the decision limit is £30,000 for an officer or EFH delegated decision. So what are the criteria around deciding that amount? How do you decide that amount? And actually, if it is under that amount, then how are cabinet members aware prior to that decision being made? And actually, as a whole council, how are we each able to understand when that has happened and when is it reported? Do those questions make sense?
I would just like to point out that at this point in time, the Jaywick Sands item as itself isn't sitting on the agenda. Not specifically that? Okay.
I think yeah, there's quite a lot in there. And I think at the end of the day, there's and I'll be boring and say the council constitution should set out exactly how the process works, whether people follow it or not. And I'm saying that generally. I'm not saying TDC. If people don't follow it, but that's where the flags come in the system. But fundamentally, if there's a project that's agreed, then there's a starting point for that decision. So that's a cabinet decision. It might be lower, subject to the sort of the dedicated position, because with the financial side, up to £50,000, there's some delegation. So if we wanted to spend some money on a particular project, there's how much. When you've got to move money to fund it, it's just the funding decision's taken first. So if you've got to fund something over £50,000, it's a naturally cabinet decision anyway. Less than that, there's some delegations in the constitution. It goes down to portfolio holder, then to officers and senior managers as well. Normally the things we're talking about are the big stuff, so they could be over £50,000. So that would start off with a decision that goes into cabinet to agree a business case, agree the principle of doing it, agree the funding mechanism. And again, that report should address those risks around, is the contingency enough? Subject to what the project is 10% enough? So those reports should address, either it should have a business case, it also should address the risks. So they are cabinet decisions that are made. Once that cabinet decision is made, then the project automatically gets sucked into the financial performance reporting. So if it's a revenue project, it would appear in the revenue budget. And if it's a capital project, it would appear in the capital programme, which is then subject to monitoring via the quarterly reports that go into cabinet. So if there's an overspend, an issue arising, they'll be dealt with within those reports. So there's that kind of mechanism how to report it. So original decision, the monitoring process is in place with those existing schemes. I think then when you've got a position where something perhaps costs more money, it might require, and we had one recently, where a good example was with a Spendles property, because it was subject to a business case. So the challenge was, does the business case still stack up? The price has gone up, does it stack up? So the business case was revisited. So that went to cabinet, because again, if it requires additional funding, which it did, it would go into cabinet, and again, subject to the level of funding would be full council. So you've got the constitutional levels that lay out the decision making at what funding level. So we're talking big stuff again. So the spenders one, because it was a significant increase in costs, that had to go back to cabinet. So that report again should say it's gone up, why it's gone up. Do we want to still do it? I mean, that's the challenge, isn't it? We still want to do it. So that's got to be that decision making. It's all about, is there the correct information in front of decision makers to make a valid and good decision. So those are all encompassed in those reports that go through to cabinet. So the transparency is there. It's less common that you have the lower level ones in terms of if there's small stuff like in my area. If I've got a small issue, it's costing £15,000 extra, then that's delegated to me in the constitution. I can make a decision at that level. So I'm challenging myself. Is it still good value? Do I still want to do it at kind of senior management level? And I've got that delegation up to £15,000. Anything more, it escalates up in terms of that decision making process. Have I covered most bits there? Sorry if I haven't.
Yeah, no, that gives reassurance. Yes. Thank you. Jim, my only other question on Craig's report here then related to career track, and would we at some point perhaps be able to fit in an update on career track, and when would that be appropriate to be?
So we've got, I think there's a follow-up audit in there. I think that's probably where you've seen that. But yeah, the update, we can ask the service to come back on it. It could just be a written update. As far as we're aware at the moment, we've got no huge issues in terms of what we've reported in the past. A lot of that, we brought it back. I think the last update they gave, a lot of those issues had been resolved. But I think there are still some elements that's why we're doing a follow-up, because we're now going to confirm whether or not that is all correct. And so yeah, at that point we'll have more of an update from our perspective, but then also if we need to invite them in again to give an update, we can do that.
Chair, can I ask a supplementary here? I'm a little bit confused about the internal audit matrix here, and although I may not have fully understood everything properly. Sorry, I'm just looking at Appendix A really generally, but what I'm looking at is things like Councillor Fairley has raised about career track, but there are also other things there to be confirmed, things like coastal protection, Freeport East. I mean, I can understand emerging risks from legislative changes. I'm just getting a bit confused here about Freeport East coastal protection I'm just trying to understand where internal audit, because these are kind of major kind of projects in their own right, which I'm not sure how any sort of financial allocations are made by the council to these things, and where just a very brief kind of education for me would be helpful, just to understand. Because in my past, I've seen these in project boards and program boards rather than in internal. So program projects are required to have their own, carry their own risk matrices and reports separately because they are so large. So I'm trying to understand why these big things are mixed up with. I would class some of these Freeport East things like that, coastal protection, huge issues in their own right. It just feels like a mix of apples and pears to me, but please educate me. Sorry if that sounds a silly question.
So Freeport East, as an example, is what we class as advisory work. So where we are involved in some of the meetings, just from a risk perspective, and if there's anything that we may see in terms of what they're planning on doing, can we input that might help, might not help? But it's because we've got time allocated, because everything we do is allocated with time. So this is updating the audit committee that some of our time is being spent on supporting some of those areas in terms of an advisory role. So on the right hand side, you'll see that it should say consultancy or things like that tell you the type of work that we're going to do on. Yes, yeah. So that's just our time that we've been invited along to give some advice or work with them on anything related to those areas that where if needed. So it's just from that perspective, really.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. So, good point raised, Ian, and I don't think there's anything such as a silly question because we all learn. I've been part of the Freeport East negotiations, and generally speaking, from this council, the chief executive and the leader would be attending those meetings, sometimes a senior officer, because it's part of the big picture. So you're right, I think, to bring it up, how does it fit into our internal audit? But if it's a time management thing, then perhaps that's exactly, yeah, where that fits in.
Process, do we see any audit information of project management? So we've looked at Jaywick Sands, and I can sense concerns there today. So I'm just thinking to myself that I would expect project boards, program boards to be following council constitutional rules in terms of reporting around those big issues. They're one-offs, they're start and finishes, they're not ongoing things, and big lumps of money being delivered in a very complex way. So sorry, I ramble.
No, I mean, we've always wanted to be we've always wanted to be as open and transparent with our time and what we're working on as possible, which is why we give you that information. So in terms of those types of projects or those pieces of work, our view on it is that they always have those trigger points and those milestones of where certain things should have happened or might be happening, and we offer up our sort of support in saying, well, we can check that, we can make sure that that's happening at those trigger points or those stages, because we would do that if we were going to go in later. So if we can look earlier, then we will, just to help the service, because it helps the council in the long run. And that's sort of part of why they're in there, really.
Can I follow that up, Craig, then? Because I mean, I'm slightly concerned about that, to hear that, but I mean, I'm not fully aware of the amount of money that we are going to commit to, say, things like Freeport East, how much money we've committed to Jaywick Sands. But I mean, I am interested in whether the resources of internal audit, if they are to be involved and comment on big things like this, are sufficient in order for us to keep control of these big complex things. So I'd just like to make that point, and I'd be interested if any of the, whether Richard or anybody would comment on that, because I feel a lot more assured when I know that the council is involved in big programs, regeneration, whatever they may be, but that they involve large amounts of money, they're one-offs, and they're highly complex. They have business risks, and I just have a feeling that I would like to see those separated out, so that there's greater scrutiny and more frequent scrutiny of those things going on. So something like a program board, it doesn't need to be for everything, but one may already exist, and I know that money that we're giving to Freeport East is a very small slice of what is hoped to be a very large pie. But nevertheless, I would like some assurance around the adequacy of internal audit and other resources to monitor and comment and manage tendering district council's money, and that's involved in those processes. But I may be speaking out of turn because I'm not fully aware of the amounts of money, and I would love to see the full detailed budget for the council, and I think I sent an email about that last night. Just so that would be my only comment. when programs and big projects operate, they can get out of control very quickly. There's huge business risks, and I think they need watching carefully. So that would be my input and offering to future thought and actions within the council. Thank you.
I can assure you, we hope to see those program boards and on those big projects too. I think that's sort of where we'd get a lot invited along to. But
if the council is going to monitor projects like this and council money being used and invested, I think the processes around that need to be quite robust. Just on behalf of fellow council taxpayers and residents, really. Yeah.
If I can just add to that, I do believe those processes are in place, but sometimes the information is a little bit more separated out. And I think, again, Richard, that email that I sent to you, I said, oh, would it be possible to see all the big ones sort of? And I think that's probably what Ian is saying there as well. So, yeah, I would agree with that.
So yeah, so you articulate almost the questions that Craig would ask about: is there assurance, is there governance process in place that's adequate enough, it's got the right capacity? So all those are the right questions. As part of the annual governance statement, which we're looking at next, because it's part of the account statement of accounts process, we want to capture that. We're capturing that process, you know, now, because we want to make sure that's in place. And is it adequate? You'll have a voice to that. So we'll give you the view of what we're doing. You can challenge and say, actually, we think you're not quite hit the mark, or there's a little bit of work there. So we'll have that conversation. Hopefully we get there. And then exactly that program board, that real high level position where one place you can get a real good sense of where we are across those number of projects rather than being sort of dotted about. So yeah, hopefully that's in train, and we'll all poke that and prod it as we go through and get it in the right place for us to be effective going forward. So yeah.
If I'm missing something, please tell me afterwards and slap me.
Good thing is, if it's in the AGS statement, the annual governance statement, you'll get automatic updates anyway. So you get it automatically, so you know where we are with it. Yeah, yeah.
We are, great, okay. So just going down there, when you mentioned the matrix, Ian, I was thinking about, should I be looking for a red, amber, green, etc., etc. I didn't see it, so I had to do a bit of working out, but there we go. Item number 3 down there, national non-domestic rates. Could we have some information on the percentage collected? You've got down there that you've got substantial assurance.
So that, yeah, so that's where we've not identified any what we call major issues within the audit. So in terms of collection rates, there will be a threshold, which is an acceptable level of risk, I guess. Yes.
3-4%, whatever.
The council as a whole would accept them. We'd have a look at those rates and then ask questions as to whether or not what the issues are, if it's anything that we can actually deal with, or if it's an external issue that we have no control over. We'll ask those questions during the audit and get those responses from the service, or even from Richard or from whoever. And if we're happy with those answers, or there's enough evidence to support those answers, then we weren't going to raise it as a significant issue to bring back to this committee. So that's sort of how that process would work. So within this year's audit of NNDR, we haven't identified anything significant that's outside of that.
Okay, thank you. So that's in this year's audit.
Yep.
So the previous year's audit, if there's an issue in the previous year's audit, does you carry that issue forward and look into that to see whether that issue has been dealt with, or do you just look into this year's audit?
No, so that will be followed up. So the 2022-23 NNDR, we didn't identify anything major that sits within the normal thresholds. So so we haven't highlighted that anything significant. There may have been some findings that we class as operational that we deal with the department and ensure that those processes change, make them more effective or more efficient. But there's nothing that we would class as significant in terms of the expectations or against previous years' data or information that we'd have at the moment real issues within that audit.
Thank you, Greg. So I'm aware of issues, and I would flag this as a red rather than a dark green, and it goes back in time, and it, from my perspective, would be an inability of the service to be able to deal with a particular issue. So could I ask you and your team to look a little bit deeper into that? I'm happy to provide you with information, but there's an issue there.
Yeah, I mean, if you can provide information, we can definitely look at it. I suppose we sample what we do, so all of the work that there is thousands of records. So take a sample of, I would say, 30 in those thousands, and we try to look at all of the different types of accounts to try and make sure we've got
the systems that office would be running surely would be flagging up any problems that they've got. They would be aware of problems in their service.
Yes, depending on what the situation is.
And do they bring those problems to you as an internal auditor?
Not specifically to us, no. Because
do you ask for any of those issues?
Do we ask for the? We do ask if there's been any major issues that they're worried about or they haven't resolved already. We do ask that as part of the audit process. But if the service find an issue and they resolve it, I mean, that's their role to do that.
I agree completely. But if there's an issue that's unresolved, and I'm aware of issues that are unresolved on this particular item, I would hope that they would be flagging it with you, so that then you could portray to us how things are, and I know things to be different.
Okay. I mean, yeah, if you've got that information, we can look at that definitely.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll come back in a moment.
Just slightly cautious if we're not conflating two things, because Craig's position, and you can stop me, Craig, I'll put words in your mouth, is around are the systems and processes in place within the service. Don't want to second guess you, but I think I know what your query is. That's a failing in the service. That wouldn't be something that Craig would get. He would say, has he got assurance that the systems are in place? If they don't work or we've not followed those, that's management, service management, and ultimately that's me as well. So that's my responsibility. That wouldn't be something Craig would bring back and say at that level.
Can I just come in, Chair? And I think I know what the issue is as well, because I'm aware of another issue that is very, very closely related and probably is the very same issue in another area. But as far as I remember, and I used to kind of look at performance of councils just out of interest, but as part of my job, and I recently, not long ago, looked at the performance of tendering as I'm interested in it, and I noticed that in terms of national position, there was a problem with collecting unpaid council tax, and that tendering was an outlier. I don't know if that is. I would need to go back and have a look at, and it's Local Government Information Research Bureau that's produced these. Have you seen them, Richard? And it showed that tendering was nationally quite a big outlier in terms of the rate of collection of unpaid council tax. And I'm not sure if that's a similar issue, the similar issue that you're referring to.
It is. It is. And Richard's aware. We've had a conversation about it. So what you're saying, Richard, is that this is not part of any internal audit. but there is a fault in the system itself. So is internal audit not responsible for helping find those faults and resolving them at all?
My view is if there's a failing in the system, if the system's not right, and Craig comes along and says, I think the system doesn't work, or he can't add to it, then, you know, or he can add to it, then fine. But if it's not that, and it's something that we're just not doing, that the system says you do A, and we're not quite doing A, that's not the failing in an internal control mechanism. That's a failing in the service. So we got it's great. It's always great. Don't get me wrong. So I'm not suggesting it's just one thing, but to understand that process and where it lies, because I just don't think you would be looking at that kind of level around that sort of detailed operational level. It'd be much more about systems and governance and assurances around they're in place. It overlaps again. So there's no, you can't just sort of draw a line in between it. But just a little bit concerned. That was all. Just to raise that in terms of understanding where it lies. But it's looking at each on its merits, isn't it? Where does it lie? Once we know the issue, full detail of the issue, where does it lie? In this instance, I don't see it falling with yourself. I see that with the service or with myself.
I agree with you, Richard. My question to Craig is then, when you go to whatever service it might be, do you say to them, show us what's working well, show us what's not working so well? Or do you, as you mentioned earlier, have a sampling that you just look at that data? How much level of interaction do you get? Because appreciate the fact there's only 3 of you that are covering the whole process. So this is not on you.
No, so yeah, so that is part of it. So we'll ask them, what's the issues at the moment? If it's already being dealt with by management, then we're not going to raise it again. So I think that could be part of it. As well, because if it was already an issue being dealt with or trying to deal with it, if we raise it again, then we've got to report it again, and I suppose that's the role of the management. They're dealing with those situations, so we do ask for that. We do as part of it. We have a whole list of controls that we expect them to look at and say, yes, these are okay, no, they're not, and then we start testing to compare whether or not that's true or not.
Thank you very much. This is an issue that's going back over a number of years, so I'm really happy to get into the weeds with you outside this meeting. It's not fair on everybody else, but it's interesting that Ian, maybe you should be part of conversation of that. That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so go down then further down the page. Corporate governance, assurance mapping and self-assessments to be used within this audit. Interviews with senior management required to ascertain the culture of organisation. Question from me, who does those interviews?
So it'll depend on who the audit's allocated to. So if we have guidance, reams and reams of how CITFA provide it, how should the organisation work, compare it against what our governance structure is. And then if there's any areas where it maybe doesn't fit, or if there are changes, we speak to management and say, well, have you raised any issues or anything significant in this time as part of it? But that audit is around, does Tendring District Council have a governance framework in place that fits, I suppose, the expectations for a council to have? And there's so many different guidance that sets out what that should look like. And we compare that and make sure that we do have those committees, management structures, and the ways of being able to. And there's a long list that we go through.
So, as the internal auditor, who does the interviews?
It will be the internal auditor. It's just sitting down with our Section 151, our monitoring officer, chief exec, and again, just making sure that there is that process that fits that framework.
So that's you sitting down with them.
Yes.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to get to. Thank you very much. Okay. Across the page. Oh, sorry for those digitally. That doesn't help, does it? Item under health and safety. We've got here spot checks on service areas. Apologies, I haven't got numbers from my. Spot checks on service areas to ascertain compliance with health and safety recommendations. How do you get involved? How do you provide your substantial assurance there? Because it's a big organisation, it's multiple places, incidents do happen. There was an incident in this room last week. There's been no follow-up from that incident at all. So I'm just curious as to how you get involved and what it is that you explore.
To be escalated. Are the visits happening? Are we going out and checking? Just as some examples of things that you would expect of a service, and are they doing it? And then on other occasions it could be that we go specifically to a leisure centre, or we go to find out just what's happened in the town hall, and it's dependent on what's in the scope of that time. But I believe this year's was about, do we have those processes for those following up and checking that it's all okay.
So would it be right then to put under the title health and safety, the process that you're looking at, or the reference that you're looking at, to give, so that we would know what you're doing? Because I wouldn't know if you're going to the leisure centre or whether you're checking paperwork has been done. And is your assurance just on that particular part?
So within this report, I tend to try and give you an example of the work that we would undertake. So those spot checks and whatever else that I put in there, that's more about what we've done. But I suppose if you want that extra detail, we can do that, because the scope documents, again, I'll try and summarise them for you into a way that can fit on here, that shows exactly what we did or what areas we were covering. I mean, it's probably going to triple the size of this document, but that's fine, we can do that.
Would it be possible to maybe just have it once via email to say, this is what goes behind housing rents, this is what goes behind health and safety? So actually when we get the regular report, that actually we have something that we are able to then refer back to ourselves.
I mean, every audit we do, there's a scope goes out, what we call the scope of the audit goes out to the department. So we can include you in those.
Chair, can I ask, through the chair, does the management team have a health and safety committee, or do they receive reports on health and safety and that kind of thing? So again, in terms of
the health and safety team, I do quarterly updates to management team, as well as do it up.
Okay, so again,
I'm afraid, lots of hats.
You folks are getting very stretched, and again, I'm thinking, health and safety management team issue. Okay, if there is corporate risk involved from external perspective, then I want to see it here. But or am I speaking nonsense? I just like to see your work condensed into the really important areas of internal audit that you would expect, that have system, process, finance, and risk involved. I'm sorry if that sounds like reinventing the wheel, but
do you mean like a breakdown?
Well, I'm just sort of wondering, it's another thing that I'm wondering about is health and safety. I'm surprised to see it here, and just because I think management team must have a health and safety committee that looks at internal, external issues around health and safety and systems and process. I'm just surprised. Maybe I'm not. Maybe it's me being new, but I'm just surprised that internal audit are involved with checking. Although Claire is involved, obviously, with health and safety, checking health and safety. So it's probably more about me not understanding the structure and processes of the
Yeah,
council.
I
Sorry.
think it's all just
Sorry.
part of reports, right? All of these things just fall
Yes.
into reports.
So, so for an example, we have our own governing body. There's expectations that every internal audit department, for every council, every central government, there's a certain level of work that is expected from the internal audit department. Health and safety is one of those. So not doing the work of health and safety, not involved in interviewing people, making sure they're okay, or making sure they've got everything. But do we have the processes to deal with those issues? And that's why you'll see something in there about health and safety, because it's important that we have that there to escalate if needed.
Forgive me.
No, you're quite right, Ian. And thank you, Craig. Claire, great to have you with us. Okay. Can I then ask how the system is working, in as much as there was an incident in this room last week, it was reported, are you aware of it?
I am aware of it. We've given a incident report book to member support team, and we've asked them to complete that for the incident, and then obviously we can make further inquiries around that. We've not actually had any incident report form as to what the details of that was, so we can't do any follow-up on that without that document. So they told us that they didn't have a book, so we've given them a book and we've asked them to fill that in and report back to us.
There's an important thing there to just clarify. So there was an incident, it was reported to you.
Reported to us in the fact that an incident had occurred,
right,
and that they wanted a book in order to write that incident down so they could report it to us
so the
formally.
fact that they didn't have a book,
yes,
is a bit of a flag for me. They should have really perhaps had a book.
Well, we believe they did, and they've mislaid their book, because
That's
we've
fine.
given them books multiple times in the past, but that's another issue. But yes, we've given them another book. We've asked them to complete it, and then we'll look into that.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. So the incident happened last Friday. Today's Thursday. The incident could have been of serious nature, and yet nothing has progressed any further.
Get my health and safety advisor to look into that. I mean, we've certainly not had the documents to support that incident. We need those documents to know what the incident was, where it happened, so that we can do follow up on that. We've not had that document back.
So Craig, as the internal audit manager, there's been an incident, there's almost a week, and yet there's been no report filed.
Sorry, Mark, we're going to have to press on.
Okay.
I don't know. Do you want to quickly answer that one, Craig?
Madam Chairman,
Or shall we? Yeah, I think we're going to have to press on. Yeah.
Well, I think we need to stick to items that are within the agenda to go off track.
Subject, I think. This is for
this specific incident.
Yeah,
which is not within the report.
Prior time, isn't it? These reports are prior time.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Fine.
Need to take that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Happy for that to be taken away. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Okay, we'll press on then. So, agenda number 6, report of the Assurance and Resilience Manager, E2 Corporate Risk Update.
Hello, yeah, I'm happy and ready to go ahead. I just wondered if you wanted to speak to our external auditors before you deal with my item. Just conscious that they're still online. So I don't know if you want to deal with that matter before you deal with mine.
Sure,
just to give you that option.
We can do that. But we'll go to the external auditor then.
Thank you, Chair. So before I just go through the report that we've given you, I'll just briefly introduce myself. So I'm Steve Bladen. I'm a director within BDO's public sector assurance team. And as I did say at the start, I'm standing in today for Aphrodite Lefebvre, who's on a break at the moment. So we've provided you with a brief paper that just updates you on where we are with our 2020-21 audit, and that's the audit that we've currently got outstanding and that we're still working on. In terms of the progress of that audit, I think it's fair to say that most of the detailed testing that we will undertake on the transactions and balances within the council is complete, but there are a few key areas and a few key issues that we still need to resolve. So the first of those is in relation to the valuation of property, plant and equipment, and that's in particular those assets that are valued on a depreciated replacement cost basis. So one of the key inputs into the valuation of those assets is the size of those buildings, and the way that we tend to test that is we agree the size of those buildings back to your valuations report, so the report that your valuer provided, and with floor plans, so gross internal floor areas that the valuer would have been provided with. The difficulty that we've had there is that the council hasn't yet been able to provide us with access to those floor plans. So one of the things we're doing is working with the council's finance to just see what sort of evidence the council is able to provide us with to enable us to complete that testing of those floor areas, because as I say, that's a really key part of the valuation of those assets. The second area where we are still working on is just around infrastructure assets. So there was a national issue in relation to infrastructure assets that for a long time prevented auditors from concluding on audits where those bodies or where particular bodies had infrastructure assets that were material. So the council does have material infrastructure assets, so they relate to coastal defences. So one of the things that we are now seeking to do is just test the valuation of those assets within the council's balance sheet. And again, there's just a couple of things really there that we're still working with the council to address, and that's the estimated useful life of those assets, because you do need to depreciate those assets, and the life of those assets can have a material impact on the depreciation charges that will go through the accounts. So until we're able to evidence, or until the council is able to evidence to us satisfactorily the estimated life of those assets, we're not able to conclude on that. But as I say, we are working with the council to resolve those issues and those questions that we've currently got. In the rest of the paper, I've just given a brief summary of what's outstanding, and as I say, I think it's fair to say that most of our work is now complete on the accounts. It's just a couple of areas that I've referred to that we need to complete. We do though still need to complete our use of resources assessment. So that's a piece of work that we do alongside our work on the council's financial statements, and really looks at the value for money aspects of our responsibilities under the Code of Audit Practice. So that's the one piece of work that we have outstanding. The rest of it I would describe as kind of routine procedures that we complete as we run up to conclude an audit. So things like reviewing final version of the financial statements, obtaining a management letter of representation. I would see those as being fairly routine and can be completed fairly quickly. I have also, just as an appendix, given members a summary of what the current position is across all audits undertaken by all suppliers, because I'm aware that there's quite a lot of press about delays in the local government sector, audit sector. So I thought it might just be helpful for members to see some of that detail. But I'll pause there and happy to take any questions members might have.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Steve. Disappointment, I think. Is it Steve? Did I get that right? Apologies if I got that wrong. It says Steve on the screen.
It is, yeah, that's right.
It is. Right, okay. Right, sorry. Disappointment, yet again, with BDO. Can you advise the committee, please, when did you identify the floor area issue?
I'd have to come back to you on that, councillor. It's been outstanding for a period of time. I can't tell you precisely when it was identified.
Right. Okay.
But I would reiterate that it is obviously the council's responsibility to provide those floor plans to us. It's not our responsibility to obtain them, and we haven't been able to obtain those yet.
Thank you, Steve. And by no means my frustration is against you personally. It's just where we tend to find ourselves with external auditors these days. So could you please then give us a time frame as to when you can come back and let this committee know when you identified the floor area issue?
Within the next week. That won't take very long to do.
Next week. Thank you very much. Could you please?
Within the next week, yeah.
That's lovely, Steve. Thank you. Could you please put a time frame for me on what you describe as routine procedures?
So once we have completed all of our audit work, and we've got to a position where we're able to issue an audit opinion, obtaining things like a letter of representation, doing a final check on the final version of the financial statements that we're going to give an opinion on, that sort of thing would generally take about a week to do, or a week to conclude. So that would be after we've reported to the council our findings from our audit, and we're in a position to conclude that audit. It would take another week or so.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'm aware of a scenario with your firm where an audit has 10 hours left of work to be done on it, to be signed off the annual accounts. We have asked your colleagues how long that would take, 10 hours of work. The response we got back was September. So I just wanted to try and get an idea and clarity for this audit committee as to a time frame. Your 1 week estimation for routine procedures, could you please fit that into the calendar for us and give us an idea as to what that would mean for when you be bringing it back to this audit committee?
Well, we won't until we have assurance over the floor areas or the buildings that we've referred to, and until we have adequate assurance over the estimated useful life of those coastal defences, it's difficult for me to give a precise timescale. All I would say is that we will continue to work with officers over the coming weeks to resolve those matters, but I can't give you a firm timescale on how long that work will take to complete, because until we get the information we're looking for, it's just impossible for me to give that timescale.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you're using the word week and not months like your colleagues did. Can I ask my colleagues then in the room here, my officers, are you aware of when the floor area issue was brought to the council?
Yeah, with two things as well. Is I'm not sure there's anything outstanding. So I'm not sure what's outstanding, Steve. So because as far as we're concerned, we provided what you need. I think one of the frustrations was going back a good year and a half now is that our valuers changed. Our valuers changed, and we did ask BDO what information did we need to retain from our valuers, and we were told none. So I just want to make that point because I think that's quite important point to make. So as far as we're concerned, at that point we weren't aware of any further follow-up. So we didn't provide those floor, we didn't have those floors. So we don't retain them because we just forgot to retain them or whatever. We didn't retain them because it was from a judgment that we took with that conversation with BDO. We have got floor areas now, and I think that's what you've got, Steve, isn't it? You've got some information from us, but because as far as we're concerned, we're not working on anything at the moment, and there's nothing that we are, as far as we're concerned, outstanding. So please tell me if there's anything that we need to get to you, because as far as I'm aware, there's nothing outstanding.
Thank you very much, Richard. I really appreciate that. So, Steve, you've heard it from our officers here that we have provided you with what you require, but it still seems to be a problem at your end. Have you received them?
So I will look into it, Councillor Platt, and come back to you. My understanding was that we hadn't received the floor areas yet, but I will look into what we have received and I'll come back to you with a response on that.
Thank you very much, Steve. Could you also please give us information regarding how many other councils that you're dealing with that are having to estimate the usable life of their sea defences, or is it just us?
So in terms of councils that we work with, we at BDO work with, I think you are the only ones, because you're the only coastal authority that we work with. I'm assuming that other auditors up and down the country will be working with other coastal authorities that have similar coastal defences and are having to estimate these useful lives for those.
Thank you, Steve. I suspected that would be the case, but there we are. I'm not really bothered. I don't think any of my colleagues are about other councils, and we're interested in tendering council today. The estimated usable life of those sea defences, they were put in place in conjunction with Essex County Council and the Environment Agency. What document are you expecting to have this council procure for you? What would you accept if the Environment Agency was to say to this council, okay, well, back in whatever year it was, 2015, 16, 35 million pounds was spent, and we estimate that their life is going to be 100 years. Is that something that you would accept and therefore enable us to be able to move on with our audit?
So what we would be looking for is it's really someone who is qualified to be able to give an estimate around the useful life of coastal defences. So normally, in where you're looking for information on how long an asset will last for, it is usually, or you would usually get something from, for example, a structural engineer who is able to give an opinion on how long something would last for. It's not something I would expect an accountant to be able to do, because they don't have the necessary qualification, skills or experience. But ordinarily we would look to rely on something that, as I say, a structural engineer, could be the Environment Agency. I don't know who in particular you're referring to within the Environment Agency, but it is usually that kind of independent third party with the relevant skills and experience to give that opinion that we would rely on.
Thank you very much, Steve. So could you then clarify for us that you would accept an estimated usable life statement from the Environment Agency and therefore be able to move slightly forward with our audit?
I can't say for definite. It would depend on who within the Environment Agency is giving that estimate and what their qualification, skills and experience are. So without knowing that information, I can't say whether we could rely on it, but there's certainly something we would look at if that's what you were able to provide us with.
So thank you, Steve. So somebody that was suitably qualified to provide certain information from the Environment Agency that would be able to give you information on the estimated usable life of our sea defences would fit the bill.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
As I say, if they are suitably qualified, relevant experience, yes, that would be helpful.
Thank you. I'll refer back to the officer in the room.
Yeah, Richard.
Forgive me, I'm slightly confused, Steve, because you've got that independent piece of information we provided. That's why I was confused when you said, was there anything outstanding? So we have provided, sorry if you weren't aware of that, but we have provided something that's independent. It was a person who was involved, a civil engineer involved in the coast protection works. So that was why I was trying to clarify, is there anything outstanding from us? Because as far as I was aware, you've got everything you need to determine the outcome. So I don't think we do need anything additional. That's so forgive me if I'm getting this wrong, but I'm slightly confused.
So Steve, apparently you already have this information.
So we have a shall I go? Am I okay to speak? Yeah, okay. So we have yes, we have a piece of A4 paper from an independent person who's given us some information on the useful life. I think what we need to do is just understand from them what their skills and experience are to being able to give that opinion on that life of those assets. Because
So
without speaking to that person and without finding that out, I can't say whether what we have is sufficient.
If I can just come in there, why have you not spoken to the person in question? These reports have been passed to you?
We just haven't had the time to do that since they've been passed to us, but we can do that.
I think you need to put priority to that. If you've already got reports, you need to act on it and act on it straight away.
Well, we can't always act on everything. With respect, Chair, we can't always act on everything straight away. We have other clients that we work with, and we do get to things in turn, but we can't always act on everything straight away. But we do have the piece of paper that the Director of Finance has referred to, and we will seek to have, or we will potentially write to that person who's provided that to understand what their skills and experience are.
Richard.
I just want to clarify. It's a letter, isn't it, Steve? It's not. I'm a little bit disappointed. It's referred to as a sheet of A4 piece of paper. It's a letter from a civil engineer that worked on behalf of the council. So I just want to make sure you're aware, the committee, what the bit of paper is. It was an email that was followed up by a letter.
thank you, Chairman. And I'd like to put on the record, I've got every confidence in the officers here that when they're asked to do something, they do it. And, you know, as I said at the very beginning, disappointment seems to follow BDO everywhere they go in my world. So what we've established is that Steve, your company does have the floor area. It's been sent from my offices here. You've been sent the document, however you might refer to it, which gives the estimated usable life of the sea defences. So what we've got left really is just routine procedures that, according to you, take 1 week. Therefore, I ask you again.
The routine procedures that I was referring to are after we have completed our work around evaluation of the sea defences, the depreciated replacement cost assets. So that's not referring to the work that we've still got outstanding.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So what we've established then is that you have everything you need. Is that correct?
Without auditing what we have, it's difficult for me to say that we have everything we need, but we do have information that's been provided to us. Yes, I agree.
It's clear to me you haven't audited because you wouldn't have brought the floor area issue or the sea defence issue to our attention if you hadn't done that. But there we go. So when will you be coming back to us, Steve, and giving us an update as to, you know, sometime in the never when we'll get things sorted?
So it won't be until later. It certainly won't be during August, but I would expect that some of the work that as I've referred to, would be completed during September and October, but it won't be August.
So it won't be August, we know, because that's when your holiday time is, and I've had that from David Eagles just the other day. October is when you're working on it, but September is when you said that you would be, as a company, not you personally, this is not against you, Steve, it's against BDO. September, you've promised Essex County Council that you'll have a clear way forward for their 2021 audit. But you're giving us a bit of a false hope here, really, by saying September, in my opinion. My feeling on this, we won't get anything sorted till March. But there we are. I'll leave it there, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask supplementary? Hello, Steve. It's Councillor Ian Leonard. What I'd really like to know, Steve, is in terms of trying to get this done in a business-like fashion, it seems to me that your company will be well experienced in understanding valuations of properties, particularly, and how they're valued and the different opinions. So I'm trying to understand what it is that you will find difficulty with in getting a quick assessment of the valuation of the properties, details of which we've given you. And secondly, my query about, and I've lost Steve, is he? He's gone, Chair. Oh, hello. I'm not sure if Steve is still available. Is it Aphrodite? No.
Good morning. Steve seems to have dropped off, but I can take your questions and we can come back to the council with the questions.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't get your name.
It's Tiamo.
Tiamo.
Yes.
Okay, Tiamo, thank you. Just a very quick question that you can relay perhaps to Steve or whoever you need to. I'm very keen that you provide Tendring District Council with details of what qualifications and experience you would expect a person to have in making a valuation of sea protection assets. I don't think that would take too long, just so that we can break the impasse that we seem to have about whether somebody is qualified or not. If you can specify to us what, if you can pass this on to the relevant person, if you can specify to us quickly before the end of July what skills, qualification and experience a person who might provide a valuation on sea assets would have, and whether they would need to inspect those assets as well. And secondly, can you please provide us with an answer on, I mean, your experience of valuation of properties based on a variety of information that may be provided, in my mind, shouldn't be too complex with your experience. So if you can let us know exactly what is preventing that valuation being confirmed by yourselves to complete what are our 2021 accounts, which is quite astonishing, really, that we're talking here, spending council money, talking about 2021 accounts when this kind of thing can't be agreed. So if you could do that, Tiamo, I'll be very grateful. Thank you.
Yes, we'll do that, and we should have the answers back to you.
Before the end of July, if that.
Before the end of July, yes.
Any more questions? That's it then. Thank you.
Thank you for attending, Tiamo, and also Steve.
Okay, thank you. Can I take it that we can drop off the call now?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. Okay.
Richard, I've just got a couple of questions in terms to the national picture, the backlog, and then service from BDO in terms of how do the delays impact on future years? What are we likely to be doing? And actually, in terms of where we are now, are there things that we can be doing now that are going to reduce impact later on the external audit process?
So yeah, so we would have had the work, that have had the accounts, they've had our working papers that they require. So as far as we're concerned, it's that they just got to get stuck into the audit and then the questions that come from that. So we provide as much as we can up front, working papers that hopefully are clear, easy to follow, and then they need to start their work. I think the thing is what's really important as well is that the government are making noises around resolving this at a national level. When, I don't know. That's the thing, isn't it? Because we're hearing now they'll finish off the 2021 audit until September, October later. Is it going to be, you know, does that mean they're not even started the 21-22 audit then? And we've still got to, you know, we're going to publish our 22-23. So the backlog, you can't see sight of it being resolved unless the government step in and intervene in quite a significant way. And we understand that is the case, that hopefully shortly, July was the last thing I heard, that there should be something announced in July at a ministerial level, will be announced that would actually resolve this backlog. And then hopefully we clear that. I'm still not confident in that it won't happen again, because it's clearly a capacity issue, resources issue, which is not their fault in terms of the capacity issue to a large extent, but we just don't want a backlog building again. We're just going to go around the same circle, aren't we? Same circle. So we've got to get stuck into the 22-24 audits quite quickly. So I'll stop rambling on.
Thank you. If I could just come back to that. Thank you. That's interesting to know. I would like it noted actually that my disappointment that they brought forward a report that is actually infactual. They didn't have the details on there correct, and I just think that needs to be noted.
The disappointing for me is that it was manoeuvring across to it as our fault, and I felt that, I don't know, that wasn't just me, was it? And which was a little disappointing. I don't think that's necessarily the case. And again, that's why I've been purely pragmatic. Is as far as we're concerned, and I've cleared it, is there's nothing you're expecting for the TDC to provide you, and the answer was no. Obviously, they might come back, but at that point, after the question, was nothing outstanding from TDC. So as far as we're concerned, it's just that piece of work they need to go to satisfy themselves. But that wasn't.
Thank you, Keith. Can I ask SIPFA, I think it's SIPFA, appoint BDO to us through the national scheme? What's our duration with them going forward?
We have got the 22-23 audit would still be under BDO, and then KPMG follow on from the 23-24 audit. So it's 1 more year. Well, 2 years, because it's still 21-22 outstanding, but yeah, 21.
And would I be correct in your professional capacity of stating that KPMG wouldn't begin any work until the previous accounts were signed off?
I think it's exploring a pragmatic approach, that what can KPMG do, or what they're willing to do in the interim period. So that's the discussion we'll be having with them over late summer into autumn, probably more to autumn now, in terms of what can we do and what are they looking to do. So
would you agree that BDO are in a position where they know that they get paid proper money for doing the NHS accounts, and therefore everybody else is second, third and fourth fiddle?
It's an issue that the Redmond Review is looking to address. I think it's understood. That's understood. There's a fee issue, and the Redmond Review did pick it up, so it's not a surprise to anyone. But the Redmond Review is trying to find that balance.
Right, we'll come back to a report of Assurance and Resilience Manager, A2 Corporate Risk Update.
Thank you. Some hard acts to follow there, isn't it? I hope I don't disappoint. Okay, so my report is to bring to you an updated corporate risk register. So just to give some background, and this was last presented in September 22 under the old administration. It's brought before the Audit Committee on a 6-month schedule. And I collate the report by contacting the responsible officers and gain the information from them, and then put that into the report, and obviously discuss that with the officers as to what needs to go in there and what doesn't, and what the score should be. Just to give you a background as to how the documents got together. In the middle of the document on page 27, it gives you a score as to how many have been amended and under what type. So there's 5 schools that have been amended, and then 17 actually risks have been amended. And then if we go further into the report on page 29, it does give you a breakdown as to how those scores have been amended and why, which I'm happy to break down for you. I won't go into all the risks amended as there's so many, but I'll give you a brief breakdown as to why the scores were amended for those 5 cases. So 2A coastal defence was increased due to the comments within the report relating to cliff instability and funding to be identified. Item 2D, ineffective delivery of transformation project. There's a comment on there considering whether this item can be removed for the next meeting. In the main context of my supporting report, it does say that a full review of risk management across the whole authority is going to be carried out in the next 6 months, and this is one of the items that will be reviewed as part of that, and we'll be looking at what items need to remain on the report and which new ones could be introduced. So that one was reduced because the transformation project, as you know, has now reached its conclusion. So therefore that score has been reduced to identify that. Item 4A is loss of key staff. When this was last reported in September 22, there were some issues around recruitment, so the scores were increased to reflect that. Those issues have now been significantly resolved, so those scores inherent score has been reduced accordingly. And the same for item 4B in relation to that. Item 7A, the local plan. This score was reduced from 12 to 5 on the residual risk due to the local plan being enforced since September 22, and but the item needs to remain on there because obviously the local plan will be reviewed in 2025. So if that doesn't happen or we're behind schedule with that plan, obviously those risk scores could be increased to reflect that, and that's why the item remains on there. I just want to bring to your attention within the report itself, on page 29 at the top, there is a comment on there about the fact that a review will be carried out and how we're looking to include a comment around the assets of the authority and whether we can include a risk base around that. And that's something that we'll review when we do the full review in the next 6 months, and that will be brought back for the Audit Committee in the January 24 meeting. As I say, there's a list there of the risks amended, and within the document itself, it is quite a complex document. I can appreciate that. I hope that you've had time to read it. So I won't go into all of the risks and why they've been amended, because it is there for you all to see. And I just invite any questions really. Oh, and I do have an apology to make. That Appendix A was missing from the report, and I provided that to you this morning, so that's my apology. You do have that now, and that just supports how the risks have been scored. And I'll just invite any questions around that, please.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, I think Zoe.
Thank you, Claire. First of all, on item 2A, so I've got a few questions. I'll go through them one at a time, if that's all right. So item 2A, from the residual risk has increased. On the risks amended under 2A, you've got coastal defence, officer responsibility updated from corporate director operations and delivery to assistant director building and public realm. Is there any reasoning around that? It seems counterintuitive in some respects that it's going from director to assistant director when the risk has gone the other way.
It's a change in responsibilities following a restructure within the authority. So it's just a change of responsibility for one officer to another.
Thank you. Then within the actual reports, bear with me. Somewhere, okay. Page 15, which is risk 2E, Essex Family Solutions. Do you have a timeline on that now the funding's been secured? Risk 2E, it's got their funding has now been secured. I'm just wondering if there's a timeline available on that.
I don't have one available, but I can ask and come back to you if that's okay.
It has been done. It has been done. So it might be just the language, because I think it has been. It was brought onto the establishment a little while ago. So yeah, so it's just language probably gives indication it's not done, but it is, yeah.
Okay, thank you, because I did wonder, because I did have something in my head. Okay. Again, there's on 3C, which is page 19, in grade italics, it has administrative officer undertaking training. Has that, NEBOSH, yes, is that a done thing, or is that to be done, and is there a timeline on that?
Yep, I can answer that as I manage the health and safety team. The training is ongoing. The officers already passed one of their exams and they've got another one pending in the next few weeks, but they're moving forward with it very well.
Great, thank you. On risk 3D, again, grayed out italics on page 20, new compliance officer appointed in March. Is the appointment expected to be able to reduce the risk, the residual risk on this one? And yeah, so yeah, that's the question.
Once he's up and running, he's still ongoing training at the moment. He's still on probation period, but once he's up and running and he knows exactly what he's doing, we'd look to reduce that score, because obviously he'd be he'd have the knowledge and experience.
Again, timeline, if possible, on that would be great. And I think that's, yeah, no, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Page 14, just looking for clarity on what this is. Is this about the construction of a building, or because what I'm looking at is the residual risk is down. I'm looking at what you're trying to risk rate here, actually. That's my real question. Is it just about a building, or is it about the business risks around that building, or?
This one was around the project work relating to the transformation itself. So because that transformation project across all the different sites has now taken place, that risk is lower, and that's why that score has been reduced. So it was around the risk of not carrying out that work and not performing that duty, which the risk has reduced because that act has been carried out. It's been completed. That project it is almost complete. Yes.
Is that
that's the transformation project. That's across, yeah. This will also form part of the whole review that's going to be carried out of risk management across the authority as to what should actually be included in the register itself.
No, housing reception was this room before. So part of the transformation was the creation actually of this room, which is interesting.
Amongst other buildings, yeah, it was different across different. Any more questions?
Thank you very much, Claire. It mentions in here about this coming to this committee every 6 months. Yet the last report was in September. Can you just clarify why that was?
It's the position. The review was undertaken, but there was still less stuff outstanding. So it wasn't been of the quality to present to this committee. So the risk was still being managed, but it wasn't finished for the March's meeting, ready to be presented. So it was pulled from the agenda because there was lots of information. As you can imagine, this is quite a complicated document to pull together, because Claire has got to talk to a lot of services to get that input back. And unfortunately, the clock ticks along, and you've got to guillotine it at some point and say, actually, we're submitting this to the audit committee or not. And I think the decision was taken is there was still too much outstanding, and that's where we asked if we bring it back at the next available opportunity.
Thank you very much. And it does say here the corporate risk register is, where possible, brought to the committee at 6 monthly intervals. Yeah. I just wanted to explore, because I wasn't here, whether there was a specific reason as to why. No. You've elaborated. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. page 28, corporate IT, online training is provided. I'd like to have a little sight of that training, if that's possible. Is it training for members? Is it training for staff? What's the scenario there? Sorry, on page 28 on this. Yeah, yeah. Apologies. I haven't got that.
You wanted clarified about training?
Yes, it mentions online training is provided, which is tailored towards identifying the weaknesses throughout the authority, which could make the council vulnerable to cyber attacks. That's a real thing, you know, with the Ukraine and everything else that's going on. This online training, is it for just council staff, or does it include members? What's the position? Because I'm unaware of it.
Yes, there's Matobo training that is rolled out to all members and staff, and this is monitored by the IT team. So that is something that they would ask everybody to partake in.
Thank you very much, Claire. Have I missed an email that mentions, as a member, this is how you can get involved with training online?
I couldn't possibly comment on whether you've missed an email, but I can get the IT department to check who still needs to carry out that training if you'd like.
Yeah, I think when we first started, we were asked if we want the training. So I don't know, maybe that was missed off, or
that everyone receives training. Because
I haven't got a list as to who has and who hasn't, but I can get IT to collate one if that would help.
I think we should encourage all members to make sure we're doing our side of things as regard to, you know, up to date.
I'm sure they do encourage it. It's just you can lead the horse to water, you can't make it drink kind of scenario, isn't it?
That's great. Thank you very much. Bottom of the page there, the national and global landscape continues to impact the council. A review of the corporate risk register carried out during 23-24. That's the corporate risk register. When's that going to begin?
Following this meeting.
Oh, great.
Once this one's been signed off and agreed, in the next few months we'll start that. We've already had some pre-meetings relating to that with management team to discuss how we would like to do that as an authority. So we have already started the process. We just need to continue that, and that will, as I say, that will come back to you in the January 24 meeting.
Thank you very much. Then there was page 29, coastal defence. My colleague referred to this earlier. Description update relating to the risk and the stability of the cliffs. Current action updated. Update provided for the cabinet member. Would it be possible, considering the risk there, for this committee to have sight of that report?
I can certainly ask for that to be forwarded to you. Not a problem.
Thank you very much.
There's no more questions. We'll move on.
No, sorry, Chairman. I do still have some on the actual item itself, if I may, if you'll indulge me. So that's the clips. Right. So page 12 of the next part. There's a community asset map, and this is on page 12, corporate risk register. As mentioned here, a community asset map has been produced by North East Essex Alliance. This provides a useful tool to identify where to focus resources to strengthen and build more resilient communities. That's a very important thing for members to be aware of. Could we possibly have that circulated?
I can certainly ask HR for that. I'll get that circulated as well.
Thank you.
On tendering CBST site, it's about community assets. Not quite what I expected, but it is nonetheless worthwhile. Yeah, that's where I found it, because I was looking for it, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ian. But it would be great for tendering members to actually be aware of it as well, rather than just the voluntary sector, because there may be assets in our own wards that are new assets that we weren't aware of that we might like to engage with. So I thought it was an important thing to bring forward here. Okay, thank you. That's fine. Garden communities on page 16. It's got a low impact, a low risk rating. Considering that you've got three separate authorities here. You've got Essex County Council, you've got Colchester Council, and you've got Tendring Council. And I just question that low risk, because especially with Colchester, they seem to have elections every 10 minutes. There's a political risk there which could actually alter the makeup of the joint committee, which then could change the way things are for this council. So I'm just querying, I'm not saying something's wrong, I'm just flagging that there's an issue from my perspective as a member of the authority, that should it really be that low?
That's fine. I mean, obviously you've got potentially more knowledge around that. I can certainly go back to Gary Guyver and ask him to relook at that risk score.
Thank you very much.
Rating is suggesting that digital risk is very low.
There's a huge amount. There's a huge amount of responsibility that's hinging on that. If that fails, our local plan fails. Our local plan fails, well, I wouldn't want to begin on what that would mean. So, okay, thank you. Page 17, member conduct. I just was interested to explore whether there was a member development project within the authority.
I don't know the answer to that, I'm sorry. I can find out for you.
Well, yeah, we'll move on, I think.
So, one more thing, if I may, please indulge me, one more thing. On page 19, health and safety, at the top there, it says failure to have health and safety process in place, exposing public and staff to increased risk. Could we please just insert after the word public, members? Thank you. Okay, I'm happy to leave it there, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Claire. Right, we'll move on to report of the Assistant Director of Finance and IT. Table of outstanding issues, page 65 to 78.
Thank you, Chair and members. This is to appraise members of the table of outstanding issues that arise from this committee in general and from the annual governance statement that is conducted each year with the accounts, which are attached at Annex A and B respectively. In terms of the Appendix A, there are no significant issues to raise, and work continues on them. And in terms of Item 2 with the external accounts, I don't think I need to labour any more on that, Chair. If you're happy with that, I think our brief from BDO earlier will suffice for that. The annual governance statement for 23-24 will be published once those accounts, once Richard's able to do those. It includes certain items. Items we also bring to you for your information are RIPA. We haven't done any in the last quarter, and it's rare that we do so, but if we do, this committee will be appraised. And a whistleblowing policy went to the Human Resources and Council Tax Committee on the 6th of July. That will come into effect, and again, as it's part of its effective governance, that will be reported to you quarterly. The Redmond review, Richard has already mentioned earlier, contains a number of recommendations, etc., relating to external audit. That will be an ongoing piece of work for a long time. I don't have any particular update for the committee at this time. Again, I draw your attentions to Appendix A and B and invite any questions with regard to them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. My only comment would be Appendix B, and I'm on page 74. Ongoing, outstanding, the second paragraph there. In regard to planning committee reports, template review, planning committee automated emails to town and parish councils. Only to note that Ardley only last week mentioned to me that some planning emails seem to be going astray or to an old email address. So it's just to check that is there a mechanism there somewhere that picks up changes in contact details. Thank you.
Okay, I can take that away and action that.
More questions? Okay. Yeah. Okay, that concludes our meeting today, and the date of the next scheduled meeting is going to be held here at the Town Hall at 10:30 on Thursday, the 28th of September, 2023. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.